Who? Me. Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Jimmy album, Ghettoland. This is the latest full-length LP from LA-based rapper, singer, songwriter, producer Jimmy, a prolific artist who takes pride in the fact that he's kind of a DIY guy when it comes to not just his music, but also his music videos, visuals, PR and promo material. Hell, he even reviewed this album himself on YouTube in a very familiar format. Why am I even here? Well, the answer to that question is Jimmy is interesting. That, and I guess he emailed me one of the lead singles from this record, the song and music video for Uncultured, which I thought was pretty sick, and made me want to check the rest of this project out that dropped at the start of December, but I kind of lost track of the record in the midst of list week and the holiday chaos, so now I'm finally catching up with it here, and I'm glad I took the time I did to kind of process this record and look into Jimmy, because this project should not be looked at in a vacuum, because Jimmy has put out a fair amount of material leading up to the release of this record, and the growth he's shown from, for example, his Welcome to the Darkness projects back in 2019, all the way up until this project a few years later, is pretty remarkable, especially considering how narrative and conceptual the progression of Ghettoland is. Almost to a fault, though, as I will get into. But being new to Jimmy's music, I basically went into this LP hoping to get an understanding of what exactly makes him tick as an artist. Musically speaking, that's a pretty easy conclusion to make, as he tends to wear his influences on his sleeve, even mentioning them by name in like the review that he did of his own album here and in the music itself. Whether that be Tyler, Kendrick, Brockhampton, Childish Gambino, Mac Miller. But what stands out even more on this record is Jimmy's ethos and worldview. He is a dream chaser who encourages his fans to do the same. He hates the way our world and economy locks people into soul-sucking 9-to-5s that go nowhere. He hates the way the music industry works and does not see it as a meritocracy and more as a cliquey batch of fake friends and favoritism. He hates the way society works in terms of the economic inequity and systematic oppression he has seen and experienced himself. He's also pretty open about his struggles with depression on this LP, as well as the difficulties he's faced in terms of making his dream become a reality, and generally seems pretty focused on trying to spread a very positive and holistic mindset among his fans. Now, there's more layers to it than what I have just illustrated, but I guess going into this LP, Jimmy very clearly had his ambition set high. Conceptualizing Ghettoland is not just a record or a place, but a lifestyle and a mindset. Something I think Jimmy hopes can eventually change some of these paradigms that he's rapping about someday. How exactly that is going to happen is not exactly illustrated all that clearly, but again, there's hope, which oozes from every moment on this LP, as not a single track on this thing is wasted, because every single one of them is trying to get some sort of point across. Whether that's Jimmy being enraged over the way he was treated during a brush with homelessness on the rap metal crossover parking lot, or him writing about breaking things down to build a better, healthier, and hopefully more equitable world on Destroy to Create. There's also the anti-drug track, which sonically sort of sounds like a drug track on No Drugs. And we also see him sending fans off on a positive note with the final cut, See You Later. But with that being said, even if there are good intentions and topical focus on many of these tracks, the musical components that Jimmy is working with sometimes are sort of lacking. Occasionally so derivative they sound like mere knockoffs of some of the artists that he is very obviously inspired by, which may be intentional to a degree given some of the commentary on the LP, as he sees sort of a need to appeal to music fans and fit into the streaming algorithms by making his music sound alike to that of others who I guess are in a similarly conscious lane. While I get that in one respect, watered down versions of pieces of art from his musical idols may not be the best vehicle for his message, especially especially when we have tracks here that are so weakly mixed, with wild vocal performances, yes, but they feel very unsupported due to a lack of punchy drums or bass, whether that be on the fiery and funky title track, or the very introspective 20, where the drums and bass feel almost non-existent. If they had been a bit more prominent, I think they would have brought some much-needed variation to the cut. So yes, there are mixes on this thing that could use some work. But furthermore, there are performances on this record too that come across in such a way that they make the songs feel more like musical skits or interludes as opposed to fully fleshed out jams that you could just, kind of kick back and just enjoy the musical components of. Like the song Worst Enemy, for example, as good as some passages of this track are, it feels kind of one-dimensional and underdeveloped, ends a little abruptly too. Then there's also the consciously goofy delivery on the first full verse of Anti-Woke, which is just so campy it's difficult to deal with. There's also the I Try / Burger Spot skit, which runs way too long, but I will give it to the track that there are layers to it in terms of the narrative that even Jimmy himself doesn't really go all the way into in his own explanation of the track in his review, because in this skit he's trying to make some sort of connection with this guy that he's standing in line with to order some food at a fast food spot. Him and the guy clearly come from similar backgrounds, but Jimmy is on some different shit. He's on that weirdo shit, he's on that artist shit, and this guy too, Jimmy, is clearly not so broken out of the matrix, and he displays this through the way that they interact with each other. He tries to share some music with him, some alternative stuff, I guess, trying to bridge a gap, again, make a connection. Narratively, there's an interruption that sort of, stops that from being fully realized right there in the moment, and the guy essentially goes about his day from there. And you as the listener are kind of left wondering whether or not that guy will just kind of continue throughout his life completely unchanged, or will that be some sort of gateway for him later on to maybe reach a more elevated mindset. But yeah, generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with an album that has a theatrical bent to it. There are just too many spots on this record where I feel like that is overemphasized, though. Now, there are times where it works, and I think a balance is struck, like on tracks such as Uncultured, which is a really sharp piece of jazz rap with some of the boldest and most unfiltered rhymes I've heard on any hip-hop song in the past year. Kind of reminds me of the raw and uninhibited commentary that we would hear on records like Veteran from a few years ago. There's also Destroy to Create, which I will mention again. The rich keys and soul chops on this one make for a great instrumental. Jimmy's rapping is on point too. Break the Cycle, mentioning that one because it's great, loving the peppy instrumental on this one, the driving beats. And I like Jimmy's lyrical attempts here to fight things like generational trauma and societal expectations. There's also Hood Classic, which is a smooth, bouncy, nocturnal West Coast bop that I could hear YG featuring on in my head, where Jimmy delivers a bunch of very versatile flow and delivery switches across the track. Lyrically, he further illustrates his aspirations, also kind of makes it known what he doesn't want to be in life per se, and I think in his own way here on this track, he creates this parody or effigy of the kind of music that is often marketed to people that come from the same background that he does, and in a way is making commentary on the shallowness of it. Marathon Man, another highlight, is an eccentric, smooth, funkified jam that's a kind of Outkast style, where Jimmy brings some of his best pen game on the entire record. There's a cool pen bit of wordplay on the track that you should pay attention to. But yeah, there are plenty of cuts on this thing that are equally cerebral and catchy, but sometimes the tune and the production just does not hit hard enough. Like Krampus, for example, I do like the classic soul-inspired instrumental on this one, but just one more track in the track list here that is so bogged down in narrative and spoken word that it just doesn't really build up all that much momentum. No Drugs, while I do mess with the sentiment behind this track, has some of the worst singing on the entire LP and is just impossible to listen to without cringing. Sadly, I didn't end up loving this LP as much as I hoped I would going into it originally based off of the tracks that kind of hooked me in. Some may look at the content of this record and look at the content of my review and say that the reason I'm not loving it as much as I should is because, I don't really care about the message, or I'm not understanding the message, or I'm not identifying with the message, and so on and so forth, when, I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth. I love the message of this record. If I didn't like the message of the record, I wouldn't even be taking the time to review this goddamn thing, because nobody's asking me to review this shit. Nobody Nobody other than Jimmy, that is. It's Jimmy's heart and concept and passion and ambition that is making this a worthwhile project for me to talk about, even if I'm not head over heels for it. Because I see so much potential in what Jimmy is attempting on this record, even if at this very point he lacks the experience, the tools, and maybe to a degree the resources to make it come fully to life. However, considering the progression I'm hearing in his music over the past few years, I have no doubt he will be able to leapfrog over this record in a very short period of time if he continues at the pace that he is. So no, the concept, message, and a lot of things about the inner workings of this record are great. It's really the music, the mixing, the execution, some of the performances as well that I think are a bit off, or just feel maybe not so complete, or maybe are partially in an incubation stage. But still, with that being said, I think Ghettoland is a record that is worth listening to, or at least trying once from front to back, because I think it's a record that, despite its flaws, has a lot of good takeaways. And hopefully Jimmy keeps his aspirations high, keeps us guessing, and keeps us looking forward to the future for whenever he drops something next. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Jimmy, forever.